that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello, everybody. Hold on. Actually, can I even do it? I don't think I can, but we're gonna... I'm a Witcher. I'm a Witcher. I'm a Witcher. I'm Geralt of Rivia. I can't do it, but that's the best you got from me. Today, you couldn't guess by that, we're talking about The Witcher, but specifically, because you know me, maybe you don't actually know me, but I like to do things in chronological order. Also, totally looks like I did like a filter. It's actually kind of crazy. I don't know what's going on with the lighting. That's weird, because I didn't edit this. I'm too lazy to do so. But cool. I don't know what's causing that, but we're going to vibe with that. Anyway, this is the Last Wish collection, which there's a main, like, plot, kind of, but it's mostly just an excuse for a bunch of short story collection stories, even though these were never, as far as I'm aware, these were never collected separately. These are just a bunch of short stories in the book from the get-go. What does it say? But yeah, it's a bunch of short stories. Some of these, because I've never finished a Witcher game, and I've never been a particular huge fan of The Witcher. Not because I'm like a hater or I don't care. It's just I've never been that invested in it. I've never bothered to try, really. I played maybe 10 to 20 hours, I want to say, of The Witcher 3. I'm a bit familiar with Witcher 2, and I've never touched Witcher 1. I have seen the intro for Witcher 1, where they have the Striga fight. And then also, of course, I have seen, because I like Henry Cavill, I like how much of a gamer he is, I like how passionate he is for nerd stuff, and I know that he loves The Witcher, so I was like, well, look at this, like a fan, like a big fan, read all the books, played all the games, he wants to be Geralt. That might actually be great. I mean, he doesn't have the build for it, he's way too buff, but outside of that, like, I feel like he nailed the role. Really sad that he's gone now. We won't get into anything about that. But safe to say that I watched season 1, so I do, there was a couple stories in here that were also vaguely mix-matched into season 1 and 2, I think. I never watched season 3. I think there is a season 3. I never watched that. But I have season 4 coming, I think. But, there's a Striga fight. There's the kind of play on the Beauty and the Beast trope, kind of, sort of, situation going on in this. So I've been vaguely familiar with some of the stories that are within here. But by and large, it's just a big little bite-sized adventure into the world of The Witcher and what that all means and entails. In fact, even an origin story here for a character which is not introduced here, but will be a major important character to the main books, and to the games. That, of course, being Ciri. And I won't say what story that's in, so you're a bit surprised when it happens, because I never knew the parents, so it was a big surprise when it was revealed. But, of course, if you've never touched Witcher, then it won't mean anything to you on a first read. That being said, I had a lot of fun with it. I think Geralt shows a lot of depth already, just in the short story collection. He has a lot to say. Like he seems like the type of character that wouldn't have a lot to say, but when you give him the chance to talk, he talks a lot. He has a lot to say about things. He has a lot of opinions. But he also cares deeply about many people. And I don't know, there's a lot more to be said about that. I should probably finish the main series before that's done, but there are layers here that give promise to even deeper layers in the mainline series. So I think that was pretty good. I'll say, and even for the stories here that I kind of recognize, I think it still did a good job of bringing me in, despite the fact that I already knew what was going to happen. So I think it all worked out rather nicely. That's pretty much it for non-spoilers. I mean, if you're a fan of The Witcher, half of you are either fans of the books first, and then you play the video games, or you're a fan of the video games and read the books after. But in case you either are a fan of the video games and never read the books, or you never read or played The Witcher because you're not a gamer or whatever, I do think that this collection alone, I can't speak to the whole thing because I haven't read it, but I do think it's worth your time. I think this is a solid example for, I mean, at least as far as the games are concerned, this is a pretty good bite-sized chunk of what he's kind of, what Geralt and the Witcher universe is kind of like. Though not to its fullest extent, of course, but I do think it's a solid entry point if you want to try reading these stories. Another thing to keep in mind is Andrzej Sarkowski, however you say, he's a Polish author, however you say his name, but he's definitively said that those Witcher video games are not canon, they're basically fan fiction. His series ends where his series ends. That being said, the moment art is released into the world, you become the dictator of your own head. No one can tell you what's true, what's not. It's all fiction anyway, it's all in your head, right? So you could say what's factually true, just that the guy said it's not. But as far as I'm aware, outside of some minor grievances, because these are, at least for the first 3 games, they were major fans of the books, and they intended it to be a sort of sequel to the books. So if you are willing to look past that, I mean, I think you have a solid 3 new entries, because even while I didn't finish any of them, they all had some solid writing from the stuff I did play. So, yeah, seemed pretty on par with book quality as well. I think the prose are pretty solid. I don't think they're anything particularly spectacular necessarily. I feel like I've definitely seen better prose elsewhere in fantasy fiction, sci-fi fiction, any other fiction. I think I've seen better. That being said, it's also better than a lot of other stuff I've read as well. So there's a bit of check and balances there. Like, again, I've read, as I keep moving forward, I'm kind of not the Star Wars EU guy anymore. I'm kind of becoming the whatever I want booktuber guy. But originally I was exclusively the expanding universe of Star Wars. But that being, and I still have a podcast if you want to check that out. But that being said, what I do think, I think the pros in this are vastly better than like a common novel, if that makes sense. It is a step above, like, if Erickson is an S, then this is, and even it's a translation, so you also got to take that into account. But that being said, I still think this would be like a solid BA quality. And I don't like to do that because it's like, I don't write, so who am I to judge? I'm just judging based off stuff that I guess I've noticed in other books, from stuff that I personally enjoy, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading this. I just think prose, since we're trying to talk about this in a complete sort of package, I think it is a cut above a lot of books that I've read. Just not the best I've ever read either. So, that being said, if you haven't checked this out, I know I'm late to the party. I'm late to the party most of the things I review anyway, so it is what it is. But if you read this, let me know what you thought about it in the comment section below. And if you haven't, well, then I hope you check it out and let me know after the fact. And if I'm one of the ones that helped you get to reading it, then I've done my due diligence. But if you don't care about spoilers, if you're someone that's read the series multiple times, if you're someone that's only played the games, if you're someone that just doesn't care about spoilers because you don't like to read, or maybe you do care to read, but you don't care about spoilers, stick around. Those who don't want spoilers, there is the door. Alrighty, so the book opens up with Geralt getting a beer. Alright, he's in this tavern, and immediately we see some racism. I say racism because they now, I mean, I could be wrong, because I don't think, now that I'm talking about it, that he's from Rivia. But it doesn't matter whether he is or isn't. Really, it's the reaction given to him, because it is assumed that he's from this place called Rivia, and they don't like them, so they are rude to him Plus, he's this unfortunate thing of being a witcher, which on top of the fact is another negative in his favor, apparently. So they treat him rather unkindly. We get to see some magic signs and him beating up some people. We also get mentioned, or I just wrote down names and stuff that I thought might be important, or things I may have recognized from the game from like years ago when I touched it. We have Valorad Castellan of Wyzim, which I know Wyzim is a big important place, to Vizimur of Novigrad, and then we kind of jump back in time a bit because again, the modern day is just kind of, well, actually no, this whole thing is in the past. No, sorry, this whole story is what gets. No, this is present day still. We're not in past yet. This present day. Witcher Geralt goes on this quest, I guess you can call it. We learn about the Striga. I already knew what a Striga was, but a Striga's kind of a play on, curses and being forced to change. But basic, and there's a lot of, dark stuff in here because it's a mature fantasy. So, this child of this royal family was the product of incest, and so it was turned into a monster, yada yada. I'm just naming off stuff that may matter in the future, just be good set dressing. The Valiard wizards, swindlers, and fools. Witcher's more straightforward. Geralt smiles. So there's little stuff like that. So I forget who was saying that, but someone was saying that about the wizards being swindlers and fools, but witchers actually get stuff done. And Geralt just gives a little smile. Just like little things like that. It was not a lot, but it's immediate like characterization of this character that is more than just like a one-note character. Even in just that little interaction, just by him smiling, it really shows. Like he has a bit of humor, and it's just something about it that I just thought was really well done. It's very subtle, but I loved it. I love that little thing. Yeah, there's been 7 years with this Striga, who's just freeing about because no one's been able to kill it. So it's just been roaming around this castle that's deserted. We have an elixir that Geralt uses to enhance his abilities, and I don't mean to do this too much, but I do want to mention it when it comes around. Now, I know there's been some controversial videos on the internet. One particular figure that I'm not going to mention by name. There's a particular individual who made a very long video on The Witcher being plagiarism. Somebody else did it a bit more politely. Her video was better, and she didn't call it plagiarism. And neither would I. This is not plagiarism. As I keep reading both Elric and The Witcher, I think it becomes abundantly clear that there must have been some inspiration. And the only fault I take with Andrzej Tarkovsky is not giving due credit. Because, as the Bible says, if you want to get all biblical, there is nothing new under the sun. Everything is a variation or alteration of something else, right? Every story you read, whether it be fantasy or sci-fi, it's been done before. It's just whether or not you can bring some sort of unique spin on the genre. It doesn't have to be something major. Every story that has been told will be told. Betrayals, love triangles, horror, like etc, etc, etc. Like everything that has been done, everything you watch now, everything you read now, everything you play now, it's been done in the past in some way, shape, or form. But that's not the problem. It's just, when you have influences, shit. Like Star Wars is an amalgamation of several things. Dune is one. People call it plagiarism of Dune, even though it's not that similar to Dune outside of a few things. So you got Dune, sure. We can say Dune is an inspiration. It probably was. We got Dune, okay? But we also have the Kurosawa films, right? We also have, I have a long 4-hour live stream that you can check out on the history of space opera. But space opera in of itself has been a long-standing thing in literary fiction long before Star Wars came into the picture. In fact, did you know that light swords existed in a space opera novel way back before Star Wars ever came out? Because it did, and I guarantee you, George Lucas used to read that stuff. Can I confirm that? No. And even if he didn't, though, again, it's just saying he's not original. He's just the one that made it popular. But this stuff has existed for a very long time. Space opera is a grand thing. It's just space opera came out around the same time as Weird Tales and Weird Fictions, and the sci-fi stuff and the sword and sorcery stuff. All that kind of accumulated around a similar time. From Lee Brackett to Edgar Rice Burroughs, so on and so forth. Who else am I thinking of? Clark Ashton Smith. All these people, and I'm just naming off stuff for space opera and stuff. But to all the people, that did the sci-fi books back in the day, and all that stuff. So it's a long-standing thing, and I say all this. I say all this because Star Wars has a lot of inspirations. I wouldn't call it plagiarism though, because it's unique enough to be its own thing. But it clearly has influences, just as everything has influences. I reviewed the Way of the Dan trilogy a little bit ago by Philip Chase, right? And there's inspirations from that too, from real life, stuff to Tolkien influence and this and that, But it's unique enough to be its own thing. And I say all that. I give this whole spiel to say. And the biggest nail in the coffin is the fact that right before Andrzej Sarskowski, however you say his last name, I'm not Polish, went to go write these Witcher novels, he was an editor where he would go and translate books into Polish for his country. That was his job for a while. And literally, you can see this in his, if you do some research, if you look at what he's done, one of the things he did just a few years prior to writing his Witcher series, and I'm sure most people know where I'm going with at this point, is he translated the Elric books to Polish. I'm just saying there are more than just one or two examples of things that make it go, well, maybe there was some inspiration. All of it is different enough. All of it is widely different enough to be its own thing. But there are enough similarities there to make you question at least a little bit of inspiration. First off, guess what? So, The Witcher to begin with, Geralt, long white hair, sword usually in hand. Now, in the video games is the only time where he kind of dual wields two swords on his back. That's at least as far as this book is concerned, that is not described ever. He has two swords, but he only ever has one in hand at whatever point in time. He has to go and actively grab the other one if he's going to get it from somewhere. You know who else has a white hair and a sword? Elric. You know what else? The video games make him be kind of white, like a white person, like in real life, like just kind of pink. However, in this novel, explicitly, he is mentioned as being milk white. As white as can be. He is described that way. So he looks very similar to Elric. He uses elixirs to enhance his abilities, just like Elric does. And again, that's not enough to be plagiarism, because Geralt is definitely, personality-wise, significantly different from Elric. But to deny those similarities, especially, it's one thing with, like, Steven Erikson, right? Because he wrote Anamander Rake. And Anamander Rake is this pure black person, obsidian black, with, long white hair, and a sword that's also special. But the difference is, Steven Erikson never... Like, he says he's never read them. I mean, I have no reason not to believe him. He never edited those books into another language where he'd have to be quite familiar with it. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to stay too long on this topic, but I do think there are some similarities there. And as I progress through, I'm not here to bash the Witcher stories. I'm enjoying them a lot. I just want to see, so we can have a more objective take on this issue, this small issue on the internet, the similarities, but also the vast differences between the two as I go between both stories, because I've also been reading Elric. That's enough of that. So he goes to do this whole plan to kill the Striga, and Ostrit tries to kill Geralt. He plans to remove Foltest, so we get some political intrigue here. Of course, he fails to do that to Geralt, and so he ends up becoming bait. We also get our first mention of Yennefer here. We also have some... Oh, sorry. I'm wrong. That happened... Well, I'm not wrong. But, so basically, he beats the Striga, he starts bleeding out, and he falls unconscious. The present-day story, then moves forward. He's recovering at this place, this cult of Melitol. I don't know how to pronounce it. But during that part, he mentions Yennefer. We also get mentions of Dandelion. And then we begin with our first short story, A Grain of Truth. This is where we also get to see Roach, who is Geralt's trusty horse. I wrote down Nevellian Dijen /Vangar. This is this sort of beast-like person who we learn in his backstory. I mean, he was with a bunch of buddies who basically kind of goaded him into it, but still he chose to do it, so I don't really feel sorry for him. But he raped a woman which cursed him and caused him to turn into a very Beauty and the Beast looking sort of figure, something of that sort of vein, I guess. And at first he was really upset about it, but now, because of the novelty of being this weird creature, a lot more women are into him. But also part of the story was, Geralt's asking him a bunch of questions, debating whether or not he's going to kill him, but he realizes he's just a guy, so I'm not going to do that. We also learn about a Bruxa, which is basically like a vampire-ish sort of thing, but basically there's this girl that's been sucking on the blood of this guy every night, kind of, sort of situation going on. Okay. I don't remember where I was at. The dog's been barking. The joys of living with animals. Sometimes. He's very loud. That being said, the vampire, Ruxa, is in love with the Beastman. And, she ends up dying in the end because she's attacking Geralt. Beast defends her. That's not his name, but defends him, sorry. And, she gets impaled. And you can also see this in the show, not as well, but it's there. I'm gonna move past this. This is now my 5th attempt trying to finish this. So, anyway, moving on. Moving back to modern day. We hear things of Knights of the White Rose. Also get our mention of Butcher of Blaviken, whatever that means. And then we jump into our lesser evil story. We meet a character named Caldemine. And Irian, a wizard, who's actually an old friend to Geralt. And his actual name is Stregobor. This is also where we get mentions that that Geralt is albino and has white hair. This is how Geralt is described. He's not like this in the video games, but this is how he is in the books. Renfi wants Stregobor to die and will sacrifice innocence to achieve it. Renfi is another character we meet, which of course Geralt is opposed to. One more sec. The ending. The ending was thematically perfect for this particular story, and for Geralt as a whole. earlier on in the book, Jagabor asks Geralt to kill Renfi because it's the lesser of two evils. Geralt replies, evil is evil, Stregobor. Lesser, greater, middling, it's all the same. Proportions are negotiated. Boundaries blurred. I'm not a pious hermit. I haven't done only good in my life. But if I'm to choose between one evil and another, then I'd prefer not to choose at all. Which, of course, by the end, he does choose. And everything about this story's ending was thought perfect. Probably my favorite, or one of my favorites, of this whole collection. We get back to the present day. Geralt talks about his life story to Aola. I guess he doesn't speak about it much, but he just kind of spiels to her. We then move on to a question of price. I wrote down the name Caelinth. Also, destiny was a big thing. Throughout this entire story. And I didn't really get it. I didn't really care. And then we get to the ending, where Pavetta, who is one of the main characters in the story, is pregnant. Is destiny kind? Because this child that will come from Pavetta will be Ciri, which then will be given to Geralt. So, we move to the present day. Dandelion shows up, and Geralt is seemingly very happy about it. And of course, because Geralt is hanging out with Dandelion, we get to our next story, The Edge of the World, where Dandelion and him are hanging out in a previous story. We learn about these devil, but it's Deovel / Willower / Sylvan. In this one, we deal a lot with elf discrimination. And that's kind of the big thing in this particular story. And Dandelion willing to die with the Witcher, I thought was pretty cool. Because Dandelion's, kind of like, he's just the bard, just the guy that sings. But for Geralt, his friend, he's willing to die. I think that says a lot. I move back to the present day. Only thing I wrote down on this part that I thought was of note was that we learned that Yennefer can't have children, which I thought was interesting. We move back to the final story in this short story collection with the title of the book, The Last Wish. This was also something that I was vaguely familiar with because it was in season 1 of the show. But we have a Djinn, which is basically like a genie. And of course, this is all darker versions of a lot of these folklore tales. But of course, it's supposed to be specifically like Polish folk tales. So I guess they also just have like a type of genie. Because it's supposed to grant you 3 wishes, right? But of course, this is a darker version of the tale, so your wishes are going to be... It's basically like the Leprechaun, if you've ever seen that old horror film, where the Leprechaun will grant your wishes, but it's going to turn out very badly. But so Dandelion, of course, is Dandelion. He goes on a spiel about what he wants, and I think it's Geralt who says something. And so Dandelion becomes magically injured. And none of the doctors can help him because it's a magical curse. So Yennefer and Geralt meet for the first time in this story. So it's a big deal. And of course she can help Dandelion. So he's trying to get her help. but she's actually trying to backstab him to kind of do her own thing, but also not backstabbing him. It's all complicated scenario. Also, I hate to do it again. Listen. This nomenclature, I've looked. It's not used frequently in fiction. I found a few references here or there. But again, Andre, he edited these. He edited his stories into Polish. I'm sorry. But he calls Geralt is called in this book the White Wolf. The Weird and the White Wolf. It is a predominant thing that Elric gets called in his own series. I hate to call it out. I just listen, it's right there. It's the same name for a similar character for basically the same reason, because they're both albino and they both have white hair, and they're called the exact same nomenclature. Listen, it's not plagiarism. There are significant differences, but to deny influence? Come on. Moving on. We also get mentions of Triss Marigold. She's not in this story, but we have her mentioned. Of course, Triss is another love interest in the video games. I know she's a character in the mainline novels, but I'm just mentioning here. Who's also a friend of Yennefer. Geralt is also naked, and Yennefer sees it because the Witcher series is extremely horny, which is something that the Elric series is not. I was kind of confused. Yennefer sort of like hypnotizes Geralt. I don't know if she's actually doing something to him or if he's just entranced by her. I don't know. Anyway, we also get but basically she like backstabs him to go do her own thing. He's forced to like, I think he is hypnotized because he's like forced to do this stuff. You know, he like kind of like gains his senses back at some point. I was kind of confused by that. Anyway, but we also just get a one-off mention that Yennefer used to be a hunchback, which I know that because I watched the show, but like it just kind of like offhandedly mentioned. But anyway, you know, she's trying to get like the Djinns like power, but it's not working, and Geralt makes one last wish. And we don't know what the wish is, we're never told, but the wish basically makes it so the Djinn can never harm her. But obviously has to do with his infatuation with her as well. And again, we don't exactly know what that is. But it's a great ending, I think, and a good start to the relationship. I mean, again, I know that you can, of course, it's a choice-based game, so you don't have to, but you can romance her in Witcher 3, and of course, she is the romance in the novels. So we'll see how that progresses. But already, even just with this one-off story of them meeting, the chemistry, the sparks are there. Move back to present day. I just wrote down, I don't know if he'll matter. I don't know if he's a character in the video games or not, or if he's a character in other books, but there's this character named Dennis Cranmer, who's a dwarf. We also have this character named Talis, I don't know. But his face is cut, and I'm pretty sure he's in one of the video games, so I'm just mentioning him. That's kind of where the story ends. It was just basically an excuse for a bunch of short stories. That being said, I had a good time with it. So, yeah. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk. I know I kind of harped on the Elric stuff, but I think everything's trying to upset me today. But I just thought it was important to mention some of these things because it's not trying to be a jerk. It's there. Like if you don't see it, like you just, I think you're just purposely not seeing it. But that's pretty much it for today. Up next, we do have another Elric story, Elric, the Vanishing Tower. Another Elric story after that, and then we return with Geralt of Rivia with Witcher Season of Storms, which I know was written later, but it would be placed next, chronologically speaking, so I'm going to read it there. It's not a spoiler for me. The small spoiler that's in there, I guess it's a big spoiler, because there's like a vision of the future or something. I don't know. I'm vaguely familiar on the non-spoilers of that book, but I already know what happens at the end of the books anyway, because that's the whole reason people tend to agree with the author that's not canon to the games because of how it ends. And I'm okay with the fact that the games contradict that. I whatever, but anyway, I know what that happens, so it's not a big deal for me. But yeah, till next time. Uh, I don't know. I don't know how to bookend it. I don't know. The lesser evil conversation. If you are familiar with it, what's your perspective? Yeah, I like that. Open up a question. Get up in a conversation down in the comments, which I doubt I have because I'm very small. But I'll leave it there for you anyway. Anyway, till next time. Bye bye.